Alright, so this is the first bassline that we're going to create in this new series, this one of 10. This is going to be the first one. Now this particular bassline you might have heard in a few places. This is it's going to be a pretty standard bassline. It's just we're going to use reverb in a really interesting way to give it a bit of a pumping effect and muck with it and kind of make it evolve when it's not playing, if that makes sense. Well, I'll show you how we're going to do this, right? So first we're going to insert a new MIDI track. Now this is going to be our bassline track. You see I've put a kick track here. This has just got a simpler in it with a kick drum. I'll leave that in the live set file so you can have a look at that. But if we load up this MIDI track here, let's call this bass, and we're ready to go. Now as usual I'm going to use an operator here, so let's load up an operator. Ableton's built-in operator, and this is the synthesizer here. Now for this one we're going to use we're going to keep it very simple. We're not going to get into too much in-depth synthesis. First thing I'm going to do is go over here. I'm going to change the algorithm of the operator to this one, so that means that all four of these oscillators are all going out. They're getting mixed together. They're not actually modulating each other. They're getting mixed together. So that turns this into a nice four-channel a 4-oscillator subtractive synthesizer, basically. So at the moment, you see if we go over to this first one, A, this is what we're just going to be using for now. This is our first oscillator, oscillator A, and we're going to, let's just put in some notes really quickly. I'm going to mute the kick drum for you. Let's put in a new MIDI clip. Let's put Shift Command M there, which is the shortcut, quite handy. And we'll go down. Now, if you've watched my videos before, you know I like the key of G. Just because I like it. So let's just put in some notes for a start. Let's just go one like this, duplicate it across, very simple, just so you can hear a sound. So you can hear it's a pure sine wave. If we go back into the synthesizer, we can see this oscillator here, the waveform is a sine wave, and there's nothing really happening to it. It's just playing a pure sine wave for us. That's all good. Let's just start with the sine wave, just to give it a bit of a kick to it. Let's go over to the pitch section over here. So if we go over here, with the pitch shell, we can turn on the pitch envelope. Now of course this means that this line here, this envelope here, affects the pitch of each individual hit of the note, which is really handy if you want to give it a bit of a punch to it, or you can do all kinds of crazy things. So if we turn that pitch envelope button on here and we bring the pitch envelope amount up, this is how much of this envelope is actually going to be applied to the pitch of that sine wave. We can start hearing a little bit of results. So you can hear each one of those hits starts here, and if we can see, it starts at plus 12 semitones, so it starts at an octave above and goes down very quickly to the sustain level, which is 0 semitones, which is the G, the actual pitch of the note that we put in, and it does this at a speed of 600 milliseconds. So you see we can move the milliseconds up and down here, or we can actually click and drag this line across here if we want. But for now, we'll do it with this. So if I bring this shorter, you can hear that the pitch goes from this high point down to this low point quite a lot faster. And you can actually get to the point where it doesn't really sound audible like an actual pitch change, but it sounds like kind of a bit of a punch, like almost like a kick drum. And of course, if we bring the pitch envelope down, the amount, we can define how much of that we want. We can also change the peak here, so we can actually bring this up, the peak and the initial, and this will give us more oomph. So it'll start kind of really high. We've got plus 31 and plus 41 here. So we've kind of got a kick drum going on here, but we don't want that. We want to bring these right down. We just want to use this for a bit of punch, so maybe a bit more decay. That's very good. Now if we go back over into the oscillator here, you see we've also got an envelope for the volume of the amplitude of this particular oscillator. So this is of the volume of the sound. Over in the pitch one we were doing it with the actual pitch of the note. Over here we're going to do it with the actual volume. So if I was to bring this down here, so the sustain level down, you see how the sustain, instead of being on semitones, it goes into decibels. So we can bring this down, and again our decay time here defines how quickly it goes from this point, which is its loudest volume, down to the sustain point, which is negative 17 dB. So this is another good way to give it a little bit of a punch. So let's just bring it around here, just find a sweet spot. Very cool. I'm going to go into this MIDI clip, I'm going to select all the notes with Command A, and I'm going to hold Shift and push the down key. This is going to take all of these notes down 1 octave. I think it's all a bit too high at the moment. I like the G, but it's up an octave way too high for me. Shift, down, let's have a listen. Really, really nice low bass sound we've got here. I'm just going to bring the loop point here across, and we're going to turn looping on. So now just this MIDI clip, this section here is playing. And this is good because now we can go in and we can change some of these notes around and muck around a bit with the melody. So let's take this particular note up an octave higher. So I've just selected it, Shift up arrow. So now this is going to be an octave higher. Very cool. Let's make this note a bit shorter, and we'll bring this note here to the C, which is the fifth of a G. So it's melodically relevant. And we'll bring this G across here. I'm just going to do this quickly so we can get onto the actual sound rather than the melody. And we'll just, I'm going to change the length of this clip just down to 2 just to save time here. So I'm dragging the length of the clip from 4 bars down to 2 bars. And you see the loop markers adjust accordingly. So now just this 2 bar part of this MIDI clip is going to play. I can actually go through and delete these notes now because I don't want them. So just click, drag, delete, they're gone. And if we zoom down and up again, it'll actually bring that, the window to 2 bars for us, so we don't have that extra space at the end. Bring the piano roll up a bit so we can see more. Very cool. Now, as you can tell, we're just using a sine wave, so this is quite boring. I'm just using the sine wave here because this is going to be the sub end of our bass. Now, what I like to do with my bass lines, again, if you've watched previous videos, you'll know this, is I like to have one synthesizer working with the sub end of stuff, and more synthesizers at the top working on the high end. This is good just because you know that the bottom is always going to be a nice pure sine wave. So by doing this, I'm going to click on the synthesizer. Well, I'm happy with this now. This is our bass line and our bass sub note. I'm going to right click it, and if we select group, it's going to turn this whole thing into an instrument rack for us. Now remember, an instrument rack is kind of like a virtual rack, like an analog rack, where you can actually stack up multiple synthesizers or multiple samplers and keep things, just stack them all up and kind of manipulate them as one instrument. So this is really handy. For example, we've got our one operator here. This is our chain list, so they call them chains, or the individual layers that actually come, or that you use when you're using instrument racks. So this is the one that we've just created, and because we've right clicked and gone group, it's put it into an instrument rack for us, dropped it into the chain, and we just need to rename this as sub, like so. So now when I play this, we have our sub chain here. Very cool. Now let's go add something which is more on the high end of the bass. So we're going to add in another operator here, so I'm going to click up here and drag it down to the chain list just below where the sub one was, and you see we now have 2 operators. Now this operator is a brand new operator, so it's just going to be playing a sine wave again. We don't want that, but first let's name it. So we'll name this, and we'll call this high bass. Might as well call this sub bass as well, just so we keep it tidy. So now we have this high bass. Now the first thing I'm going to do with my high bass is I'm going to put an EQ after it, because we've got the sub bass which is dealing with the low end. We don't want the high bass to actually have any low end because it's still taken care of. So I'm going to use the EQ8 here in Ableton. I'm going to drag this across, and I'm going to drag it after the operator. This is our high bass operator, but not after the instrument rack. If we put it after the instrument rack, you'll see that it's going to affect the whole instrument rack, but if we put it just after the operator here, it'll only affect that particular operator, which is the high bass. If we go into the sub bass, you'll see the EQ8 is not there, it's only on this one. So that's good. If I solo this high bass at the moment, we'll be able to just hear a simple sine wave with nothing on it. Very cool. Now if I click this first pole, here on the EQ, you can remember, think of this as your frequency spectrum. So down here is all your sub stuff, up here is all your high stuff, and this line represents the volume level over that frequency spectrum. So if I was to select this first pole here and click on this button here, which is the low cut, so this is going to cut everything in the low end for this particular pole. So by doing that, it's given us a slope, which means we can actually bring this up and we can get rid of all the frequencies here. Nothing here is played. Everything inside this orange line is going to be played, but nothing around here is going to be played. So that's good. So if I bring this right down and play it, and slowly bring it up, you'll be able to hear the bass go away. It'll almost get silent. So I've hardly got any sub in there now. That's fantastic. And just remember with the EQ8, you can add in heaps more poles if you want to do kind of crazy gnarly things and all that kind of stuff, but we don't want to do that for now. In fact, we can actually get rid of all of the poles apart from number 1, because that's the only one we're using. Excellent. So now we're ready to work with this high bass. So first thing we're going to do is let's go over and let's change the waveform. I'm going to use a saw wave here. So remember, over here, here's our first oscillator, and just like before, we'll go into the algorithm area here and change it to this, so they all mix together. Remember, we don't want to have all this frequency stuff, modulated stuff over here. Go back over to our first oscillator, and now we can play with this. So here's the waveform. We've got a sine. This is our list that operator gives us. I'm going to select saw D. Now it's going to play a much, much harsher sound for us. Let's have a listen. Very cool. Now if I turn off the solo on the high bass, we soloed this before just so we could have a listen to how the EQ8 changed the sub. If I turn this off, we can now get the sub and the high. I'm going to bring the level down a little bit on the high bass because it's a bit loud, so we bring this down so the sub can come through. This is where you adjust your levels here, so this will be the level of the sub, this is the level of the high. Very cool. Now let's go into this operator and start playing with the sound a little bit. What could we do here? I'm not going to do much with this high end of the sub bass. In fact, I don't think I'm going to do anything with it right now. Actually, I will. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the second oscillator here, which is exactly the same as the first one. I'm going to use this. I'm going to create another saw wave like so, and bring the level up. So now this is going to be playing 2 saw waves for us, exactly the same. Now the fun part happens if you bring this fine level up a little bit. It's going to slightly detune the second oscillator from the first one, which gives it kind of a wobbling effect, or a phasing effect. If we bring it up quite a lot, you'll be able to hear how drastic it gets. That sounds good. And one more thing I'm going to do is over on the pitch shell again, we're not going to use the pitch envelope like we did for the sub bass. I'm just going to bring the spread up. This gives it a bit of spatial feeling, quite a nice effect. So I'll bring this up slowly for you. Very cool, very cool. Now back over to this EQ8. I know I turned all these poles off before, but let's turn a few on again and just muck with the sound a little bit more. I think I want more high, kind of the really high end of this this high bass here. So I'm going to actually take this number 2 and I'm going to drop it down. I'm going to drop number 3 down a bit, and I'm going to bring 4 up like this. Let's see what that sounds like. You can hear how this fourth pole here is really boosting the sound in the high ends, where we've actually dampened the sound in this kind of mid-end. And this number 3, if we change the Q of this pole, you see how it gets more kind of sharp. This is quite fun if you want to isolate frequencies, if you found a sweet spot. Bring it down a bit. It's quite nice with that one there, it's a bit of a sweet spot. Very cool. Let's just turn on the kick and see how that sounds. It's going to be muddy because the sub frequencies and the kick are going to be arguing with each other, but let's have a listen. Very, very, very cool. Now with this melody, I'm just going to quickly go into the MIDI clip, and I'm going to go into the envelope mode, which is the mode where we can control the envelopes or various parameters which are within the synthesizer and the effects that we've put after it. So in the envelope mode, you see we've got a drop down menu. We can pick any device. We've got our instrument rack, then we've got our sub bass, remember that's the first chain, and then we've got our high bass, which is the second chain. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to choose pitch bend. Now if I click on pitch bend, this line, red line here, turns into a way that I can slightly bend the pitch of the note. So instead of putting in notes and having different pitch notes, we can use the line to actually bend them. It's really good for subtle things. You can use it drastically if you want, but we're going to use it for subtle things. And remember, this line here is relative to what you have set in your operator's pitch bend parameter. So for example, if we go over here to the global shell, or where the algorithms are kept, you'll see there's this little part here which says pitch, and at the moment it says +5 semitones, and that'll be the same in the sub bass because that's what it is by default. Again, global shell, pitch, +5 semitones. That means that this red line, which I was showing you before, pitch bend, is relative to that. So when it's at the top, it'll be +5 semitones. When it's at the bottom, it'll be -5 semitones. When it's at 0, it'll be nothing. So that's handy because you can take that up to +12, or if you want to do some really crazy big pitch bends, but +5 will do us for now. So what I'm going to do is select this by dragging across. I'm not actually going to select the line, I'm just going to select some blank space and drag across. This is specifying that I want to change the pitch bend of this area only. So now if I click the line and drag it, you see how it creates these 4 points for us. So it splits up that area for us and gives us these points to work with. That means I can take the pitch bend up here and I could bring this down here. So now that first note is going to pitch bend from a little bit higher. So it sets about halfway between 0 and the top. So that's going to be, I guess, 2.5 semitones roughly. Let's have a quick listen to see how that sounds. Pretty cool. Let's do it on this one as well, because because we've pitch bent that note up, it's actually hit this pitch here, so now it sounds almost the same. Let's bring this up quite high, see what happens. I'm trialing and erroring here, I'm not doing my maths, but let's have a listen. Pretty cool. We could probably move this up like that. That could be interesting. Maybe bring it down a bit. We can make this a bit faster. It's always nice to have a wee curve if you can. Maybe make this higher. That sounds pretty cool. Right, now the fun part. Now this is what I was talking about earlier, of getting some kind of reverb kind of driving effect going on. This is a really cool sound, and you might pick this up from quite a few tunes that are out there. So what I'm going to use here is I'm going to use the send returns. So I'm going to use return tracks. So we've got return A, return B down here. Now just quickly remember, return tracks are separate tracks which kind of sit off to the side and they wait for some kind of audio input to process information. They're not like our MIDI tracks here. If we had an extra audio track, it's not like those. These sit on the side. If I go into the session view, it gives you a kind of a good idea. So they sit over here and they just wait for some audio, and then they process the audio with whatever's on there on this track, and then it sends it out to the master as well. So this is a really good way of taking a sound that you've made, for example this bass sound, and giving it an extra kind of effect, but without actually changing anything within this bass channel. So we're going to do this by, I'm going to delete the B return track because we don't want this. This A return, I'm going to call this reverb. Actually, I'm not going to call it reverb, because if we go and get a reverb from Ableton and we drag it into the return track like so, you'll see it automatically calls it reverb for us, because that's the only thing that's currently in the track. So that's fantastic. Now this little point over here, this is this little volume meter. This defines how much of the bass track we actually send to the reverb track. So if I play this and I bring this up, you'll be able to hear the reverb start to kick in. And I'll bring this up so you can see the level. Watch the level here. This is the return track kicking in. Very cool. So I've bring that all the way up to the top. Now because I've done that, I can go into the reverb channel, and over on the dry wet on the reverb, I can bring this up to 100%. Now the dry wet again is the amount of the effect that is currently happening with the sound that you're giving it. Most effects will have a dry wet value. It doesn't matter if it's a delay, a flanger, or whatever. The dry wet says, right, dry is the signal when there's nothing happening to it. Wet means it's being affected by the effect. If we have this on 0, we get none. If we have it on 100, we get 100%. And the reason I've put it at 100 is because the bass channel is already going out through the master, so that's already giving us a sort of a dry signal, whereas the reverb, we just want the wet signal. So if I was just to solo the reverb, bring the dry wet down, but that's all we want there. Very cool. So let's go into this reverb and have a look what's happening. So at the moment, if we look over at this bandpass area, so this is a filter like the EQ8 before, but it's only got two options, a low cut and a high cut. Now for this, because we're putting a reverb over the bass, we don't actually want the reverb to happen on the low end, because that's going to reverberate the low frequencies, which is breaking a golden rule of creating a very, very muddy sound. So we don't want that. So if we turn the low cut on, you see now we've got this little peak like we did with the EQ8, so everything below this orange line is going to get cut. So if I bring this up a bit, you can hear that. If I bring it down, you can hear that bass kind of trying to reverb. Sounds like shit. Bring it up. Very cool. Now we can play with the decay time and the size here. These are the two fun ones. These kind of specify how much of the reverb is happening. So if we bring the decay time up a lot so you can hear it gets mad. If we bring it down short. If we bring the size of the room down, this is where the interesting stuff happens. You can kind of get that really metallic kind of concrete room sound. Let's keep it up quite high for now. Let's put it on around 58. That's good. Very cool. Now let's listen to it with the bass. Now here's the interesting part. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a compressor after the reverb. So I'm going to put a compressor after the reverb, and I'm simply going to use this compressor for its sidechain. So if we click this arrow here, we get our sidechain section in Ableton. Now this is great because it means we can take the input of something and have it affect how the compressor works. In this case, we want it to basically reduce the volume. So you might be wondering what that's useful for if you're not familiar with sidechaining. So if we turn it on, just to give you an idea, and I'm just going to solo the reverb here solely. So I've turned on the sidechain by clicking this. At the moment nothing's happening, but if I go audio from kick, it's going to take that kick drum as an audio source, and as we bring the threshold down, it's going to basically sidechain or get out of the way whenever that kick plays. So you're probably familiar with that sound as well. If I turn the kick on, pretty cool, but we're not actually going to use sidechaining with the kick for this one. We're going to do something a little different, and this is we're going to take the audio from the original sound, which is the bass. Now this is if you can try and think of what's happening here, the bass is playing nice and clean. Now turn off the reverb. Whereas the reverb is actually taking the bass and extending the notes out a bit when the bass has actually stopped playing. So if we have a compressor sidechained to the original sound, whenever the original sound stops, then the reverb's actually going to come in. So the reverb's not actually going to play much when the original sound is playing. It's only when the original sound stops we kind of get this sucking reverb feeling coming in. It's quite a cool effect. Let's see if this has worked. There might be a little bit more tweaking to do, but let's have a listen. Now that's all good. I'm just going to put, let's put a utility after the reverb. Now I'm just doing this to give it a volume boost. If we look at the level here in between the utility and the reverb, you can see the level here is quite low. So if we bring this up, it's just going to mean that there's going to be a louder reverb to play with. Very cool, and the more we bring the threshold down, the more extreme that's going to be. Now if we bring the decay time up on the reverb, it means there's going to be a longer tail on the reverberated bass sound. So this is good. Let's bring the size down and see what happens. This could get pretty gnarly. just going to go into this MIDI clip here and remove a few notes because we've got a little bit too many notes to hear the full effect. So let's just have a real short one here. See how that sounds. Very cool, and we can play with this a little bit more. I'm just going to muck with it and try and make it sound a bit better. So just playing with the decay time and the size. And the cut-off here over here. Very cool. Now, one more thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into the bass channel and I am going to use a compressor to get rid of the, to bring the bass out when the kick is playing, just to give it an even more of a pumping effect. So I've loaded a compressor here after the instrument rack. Remember, before we put the EQ8 after the operator in the instrument rack, we want this compressor after the instrument rack. That means it's going to sidechain everything, the sub and the high. So if we go sidechain, audio input from kick, bring this down, let's put the kick in, see how that sounds. I'm going to click on this compressor, hold down the option key which is on the Mac and drag it onto this reverb channel as well. That gives me a duplicate copy of this compressor and all its settings after this one here. So we've actually got one sidechain compressor compressing from the bass and another one compressing from the kick. Very cool. If we go into the kick and just change a few of these around, like so. Excellent. I'm just really going to quickly insert a snare track, because just to complement it a bit, I'm just going to search for snare. Bear with me here. So here's all my snare samples from all my sample libraries. Let's just find one. That'll do. MIDI track, just going to insert a simpler. Where are we? Simpler. Go back to our sample directory, drag that snare in, insert a MIDI clip, open it up, and we're going to put we'll change this length to 1, and we're just going to put a snare on the second and fourth beat of the bar. Make sure we turn the solos off. Very cool. Let's just change some of these bass notes around so we can get a more of a, just another little example. Just going to delete these. Get rid of that pitch bend, we don't need that anymore. Oops. Because I've deleted that, it doesn't actually have any points to set it back to 0, so it's actually kept the pitch bend note, so I have to make sure I have a point here which is on 0. So let's just drag this a bit fiddly. 0. Let's go back into this reverb, let's shorten it a bit, it's a bit too intense. Down to the bass, I might change this bass sound to just the high bass. Let's change the waveform to a square, see how that sounds. like that a bit better. It's a bit grungy. And one last thing, let's go over to the filter section over here. So the filter shell, if we turn on a filter, it'll give us a nice cut-off filter. So let's just solo the bass and have a listen. We can bring the filter down. That's all good. Bit more resonant, so that point where the frequency is cutting off sounds a bit more amplified. Very cool. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the filter an envelope. Remember we had the pitch envelope over here, the volume envelope over here, we had the pitch envelope over here, now we have a filter envelope. So this envelope, this line determines how the frequency or the cutoff point of this filter actually happens. And we do this by going over to the envelope amount and turning it up. So if we turn it up to 100%, this filter here, and we'll bring this down quite low, this means the filter is going to be really open and then it's quickly going to snap down to this point here. So we can let's have a listen to that all together. Very cool. I'm just going to play this reverb a bit more. I'm not happy with it. Bringing this threshold of the side chaining, which is coming from the bass, up a bit so it's not so drastic. Liking it so far. There we go. I really like that. So that's the first one. So that bass sound again. I'm just showing you that kind of how to use the send return to get that reverb effect going on. It's kind of a subtle pumping effect. It means you can muck around with your bass line. You don't have to worry about automating anything because as soon as you have a gap, something cool's going to happen. Yeah, so that's the first tutorial. Hope you liked it. I will save this live set and upload it to the Pro Members area, and you can go and have a listen and play with it yourself. Cheers, tomcosm.com.